Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, but please call me Alex, and I'm here to talk to everyday superheroes helping nonprofits using technology. Today I'm joined by Katrina Seidel from Vera Solutions. Katrina, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. So good to be here.
So for the folks who are hearing from you for the first time, could you share a bit about who you are and what you do?
Of course. My name is Katrina Seidel. I serve as the Global Business Development Director at Vera Solutions. Vera Solutions is a social enterprise and a certified B Corporation, a global organization. We operate across 5 continents and really actually work at the intersection of kind of solving problems within the social sector by helping to bring reliable and easy data. My role specifically is kind of both on the consulting side and on the product side. So, as an organization and as a consultancy, we really partner with social sector organizations to kind of support their technology implementation. So, I get to have the fun job of kind of understanding what organizations need and really helping assess if we can support them or not as they try to amplify their own impact in the work that they do. Also, on the product side, we're kind of consistently utilizing our flagship product AMP Impact in a lot of the implementations and consulting work that we do. So also have an opportunity to kind of extend beyond our consulting work and how we can support organizations with a Salesforce-based product. So based in London in the UK, but work really closely, I would say, with a number of varying sized organizations around the globe. It's actually quite neat, the type of opportunities that really come in and the organizations just that I get to speak to and help understand their problems and see if we can support them, as well as the locations of those organizations. So geographically, they're quite dispersed around the globe and always get to engage in some interesting conversations. That's a little bit about my role and what I get to do here at Vera Solutions.
Awesome. So you mentioned that Vera Solutions is a certified B Corporation. What does that mean?
Yeah, so as a certified B Corporation, we actually run through an assessment on an annual basis, I believe. Could be wrong there, but I believe it's annually to really commit to certain impact levels, socially, environmentally, financially, as an organization. So we are mission driven as an organization and want to really abide by some of the standardizations. And there's a number of other certified B corporations out there in the world doing great work that we're consistently inspired by. And kind of as we commit to our B Corp status and commit to really being a part of the B Corp community, we have an opportunity to learn from these other organizations so we can continue to do business better and just continue to learn from others. There's a number of other ways that we're leveraging, I would say, our mission status in the work that we do. Certainly being a member of the Give 1% or the 1% pledge program that was started a number of years ago, and then a number of other kind of groups and convenings that we get to partake in. So quite cool, I would say, to just learn from other organizations that are on similar missions to ours so we can continue to grow as an organization.
I believe it was Salesforce. At least Salesforce was the first time that I was exposed to something like that 1% program, where back in the day they would encourage their employees to spend 1% of their annual time giving back to the community, either volunteering or as some kind of social program. At the same time, they would also give 1% of their licenses to nonprofits, and that's actually how the Salesforce nonprofit started. And I forget that last third 1%, what they were doing. So did you come before or after Salesforce, or were you inspired by them, or was it just part of the trend at the time?
I think it was Salesforce actually that first initiated that. But we came after Salesforce and joined the program. It was time, money, and resources. So resources kind of as an organization. So I think nowadays, if you go look at salesforce.org, it's a pretty high volume in terms of they started this initiative when they were quite small, and certainly they've grown both kind of financially and globally as a team. So those numbers have really drastically increased over the years. But there's a number of organizations that are a part of the Pledge 1% that certainly I would say are worth kind of being inspired by or just exploring.
I think it's a wonderful initiative. It kind of reminds me, a bit off topic, but I know that there are certain dentists, for example, or plastic surgeons that volunteer their time to be able to help people that can't necessarily afford their services. So it's just a means of giving back to the community, of sharing your success and to be able to allow others to benefit from it, even when they may not be able to because of whatever conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've at Vera actually taken it a little bit It's called the Pledge 1%, just so we're clear on the name there. I just remembered that. We've taken it to where actually at the end of each year at Vera, we have kind of 5 core values as an organization, and we do an internal vote for the colleague that actually kind of best exemplifies those values. And then the colleagues that win those awards are actually the ones that get to kind of determine where the 1% goes. So it's quite a cool initiative and kind of helps us differentiate where we're actually giving the specific profit side of the Pledge 1%. So that's quite cool.
That is very cool. So tell me, how did the company start?
Yeah, good question. We actually were founded out of a nonprofit based out of South Africa, INGO. Our existing and current CEO and one of our co-founders, there were 3 co-founders. The other 2 actually have which gone on and started or initiated other great kind of technology-based organizations that we get to partner with. But in 2010, our co-founders were actually tasked with building a monitoring and evaluation system working for a nonprofit in South Africa actually called Grassroots Soccer. And in kind of building or growing their portfolio with USAID, they had actually received a larger fund from USAID and needed kind of to increase the accountability in terms of how that funding was spent and where that funding was going and how it was actually impacting the students and the youth programming efforts that Grassroots Soccer was engaging with in kind of the global health space and sport for development space in South Africa. So in doing that, they built a monitoring and evaluation system, pretty custom at the time, and kind of just leveraging where Salesforce was at, but built it on Salesforce and started using that to really track the program engagements and the services and the interactions with the various cohorts of individuals that were benefiting from this larger grant. And it actually kind of helped bring data, one, together and kind of decrease the time that it really took to report back to USAID. So in kind of leveraging a system for the first time, it really supported the opportunity to kind of see the value and the impact of where the funding was going. So Zach Kaufman, our CEO, current CEO, and one of those co-founders really just saw a need at the time for this across other organizations, and others started reaching out, really needing similar systems. And Salesforce at the time was certainly not the very early stages, but earlier stages. And not a lot of organizations were using Salesforce for monitoring and evaluation at the time. So Vera Solutions was born out of that back in 2010, September, I believe. We're almost celebrating our 12-year anniversary this September. And in that kind of we continue to grow, not just with nonprofits, but certainly also grant makers, multilateral organizations. Salesforce's name certainly grew as well. And we've seen a lot of growth over the last 12 years just within the social sector and within, as I kind of previously mentioned, varying sizes of organizations and geographical locations. And our team's certainly grown with that too. So that story, I would say, is still kind of at the root of who we are and what we do and why we get up every day to help kind of build these program management system, portfolio management systems, but really to help organizations deliver on their programming or grant making or just kind of strategic efforts in a more kind of thoughtful and transparent way.
So if we were to deep dive a bit further, so the main 2 categories, you provide services to help nonprofits and grant makers, as well as provide, I think your main product is AMP Impact.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about first the AMP Impact, because that's the one that I'm familiar with at least a little bit. What does AMP Impact do, and what can nonprofits see as a benefit of using it?
Yeah, great question. So AMP Impact is bringing together portfolio data. So when we say portfolio data, we're thinking about program data, grant data, project data, and impact data. So thinking about how and where is impact seen across different indicators, frameworks, theories of change, objectives, KPIs, kind of however as an organization you're really defining that or building out your impact measurement strategies. So as a product that's built on the Salesforce platform, it's helping for most organizations, a lot of those kind of 2 sides of the equation there. If you think about the programmatic data as it relates to financials and risks and work planning and delivering different projects across geographic areas or your thematic areas and bringing that together with the impact side of it. Typically that data sits in silos within an organization, or it sits in a whole lot of different Excel sheets or documents. It could sit in different systems, and AMP Impact's helping bring that together for a more holistic view of an organizational kind of portfolio. So how and where that money is going and how it's really driving towards an organization's goal. So the organizations we work with, we work exclusively exclusively in the social sector as well. And as our mission is to help amplify the impact of the social sector, we have an opportunity with Amp Impact to really understand what the missions are of the organizations that we get to work with, and then kind of help bring data together through a central product that for most organizations hasn't been brought together before. And in bringing together that data, it's typically also bringing teams together. So it's supporting kind of the collaboration from both, finance and IT and programmatic teams internally, or bringing together both the programmatic and the monitoring and evaluation, or MEL in some cases is what it's called on the impact side. So it's bringing together these teams to really kind of help understand where funds are going, where resources are going, and the impact that the programming efforts across those organizations are having. So that's really where we see AMP Impact kind of solving the most problems for organizations. There's, I would say, three kind of primary markets that we see AMP Impact playing a pretty big role. And I would say actually all three of them kind of have similar, what we've found over the years is all three of them have similar data taxonomies across kind of the different structure of how they need to manage data, but they have different terminologies, I would say, across their data. So within those three kind of bigger markets, one being the nonprofits, and typically I would say kind of larger international nonprofits that are operating across a number of different geographies or a number of different thematic areas. The second being grant makers, kind of all kinds. So funders that are actually funding implementers or funding nonprofits to deliver work and really want to drive their funding efforts around impact and how it's contributing to their goals as a funder. And the third is multilateral organizations. So your kind of larger UN agencies that are gathering money from a number of different places. And again, kind of driving a portfolio of projects that are centered around their own strategic plans that are centered around their main objectives as an organization. So we've had the privilege of getting to work with actually over 375 now organizations that kind of fall into one of those three arenas. And for a lot of them, AMP impacts the answer of a product that's helping kind of build the framework or the foundation of the system that they use now internally, and kind of helping to help them grow and help them become more data driven and accountable and transparent internally, so they can continue to, one, do their jobs easier, as well as kind of two, refocus their attention on the delivery of the work and the impact that's driving.
So that must be a lot of moving parts. And actually, because I was privileged to see some of the demos of AMP Impact. And the one thing that I noticed is that the interface seems to be quite simple. So it's quite easy to use and yet extremely powerful under the hood. It's quite impressive, actually.
And that's where Salesforce comes into play, right? And I know you're quite familiar with Salesforce on that front. But I think the reason we really build on the Salesforce platform is what you just mentioned, just the power that comes under the hood in terms of the flexibility and the interoperability and just the configurability of building on a platform like Salesforce that really allows you to kind of leverage far beyond a product that I think we as Vera Solutions could ever build. We get to continue to grow and leverage all of the great functionality that Salesforce is releasing as a platform. So yeah, I think it certainly supports organizations in a much deeper way than if it's a smaller product that maybe sits more in silo.
And since your product came out, Salesforce has recently released something called PMM, Program Management Module.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that, I know it's a much more significantly more simplistic app compared to AMP Impact, but can the two work together? Is it something you have to have one or the other, or can they work in some kind of harmonious way?
Yeah, great question. So the program management module, part of the nonprofit success pack, and I'd say it's a simpler data model certainly than AMP Impact, but it also has a lot of powerful functionality as it relates to tracking specific kind of program delivery. So when we think about an organization like Grassroots Soccer, for instance, they may be needing to one, track the engagements with their various cohorts and the services they're delivering across individual beneficiaries, but they also at a bigger level are then trying to kind of aggregate that data over a number of different geographies and a number of different even countries in their case from a geographical level, thematic areas, and then kind of align that to the financials or the budget spend associated with those and the risks associated with those projects or the, how they're delivering those projects. So where PMM comes into play is kind of that lower grassroots level and being able to gather all of that service delivery data. And then actually AMP Impact can, as a product, aggregate up that data to help showcase or aggregate into indicator results, for instance. So we have a piece of functionality within AMP Impact called aggregate indicators that can actually take data from other places in the system and aggregate within specific bounds or boundaries the result data associated with a particular indicator. So that's I would say a cool functionality that is able to kind of leverage some of the individual level data that might be tracked with the program management module and really brought into AMP Impact. AMP Impact, I could certainly, I would say, aggregate up other types of data from PMM. So we were quite excited when Salesforce launched PMM because it really kind of meant that it was extending really where AMP Impact sits as a portfolio program management and monitoring evaluation or impact measurement tool, and kind of will allow the opportunity for organizations to dig a level deeper and have a starting point for even tracking some of these pieces that AMP Impact doesn't track. So really cool, I would think, when we get to collaborate with Salesforce in that regard and kind of further expand upon the products that sit on the platform so that the products can work together and continue to add value to organizations, which is ultimately what we're all trying to achieve.
I think it also adds a sense of visibility.
Mm.
It's kind of like when Elon says, he might have been a pioneer of the electric vehicle, but he actually encourages competition.
Yeah.
Because the more competition, the more eyeballs, the more visibility, the more increased adoption. That's the word I'm looking for. So I think that you might have seen, an uptick in your visibility because, all of a sudden people are now looking, hey, there is a PMM module, but all of a sudden they might, like their searches in Google, for example, might come across AMP Impact for the first time, whereas they wouldn't necessarily look for or wouldn't know how to look for AMP Impact previous to that.
Yeah.
Which leads to my next question is, how do people find you if they're not quite sure or haven't heard of you before, or they're looking for something, but they're not quite sure what they're looking for and they end up discovering you? How does that process work? Do you have any insider information on that?
Yeah, which is just kind of reverting back to what you just previously said around the kind of familiarity with program management on Salesforce, for instance. I think it's quite neat, I would say. And if you look back, just even from the beginning of when we were founded back in 2010, just the shift that we've seen of organizations really thinking of Salesforce, like certainly as the number one CRM tool, and really that it in the nonprofit space, that it's primarily used for fundraising or marketing. But we've actually seen such a shift over the last 5 years, and then certainly in the last 2 to 3 years, of organizations really considering Salesforce as a program management tool or system. So I think that to your point there, it's certainly helpful when we're able to expand upon existing functionality with other products. And the Salesforce ecosystem is really good at that with the Salesforce App Exchange. If others aren't familiar with it, it's really where there's other tools available that you can kind of plug into your Salesforce system, kind of like an app store or on your iOS device. So Salesforce is really good, I think, about continuing to innovate and allow partners to innovate as well in the right way. So that's been cool to see other social sector organizations really thinking about Salesforce as a program management tool. And to address this next question, so yeah, how do organizations find out about Vera and find out about AMP Impact? A few different ways. I think first and foremost, and this is really centered around who we are just as an organization and kind of what's most important to us. And what's most important to us is delivering really great work for the organizations that entrust us to work with them and to help them kind of on their journeys to becoming more data-driven as an organization. So in the last a decade. So in the last 12 years or so, we've had an opportunity to work with all kinds of organizations. So from kind of being the Skoll Foundation and the Elton John AIDS Foundation to some larger multilateral orgs like Gavi and the Global Fund, and to current, INGOs like PATH and SOS Children's Villages. A lot of, I would say, the additional work that we get is, and how others hear about Vera is through the work that we're doing already with these organizations. So I think valuing just our delivery and how we can best partner with these organizations and kind of partner as previously mentioned in helping them achieve their mission is going to continue to drive more opportunities for us to grow and for us to expand upon the organizations we work with. Secondary to that, I would say outside of the existing client side and just having, I would say, kind of more of or continuing to just, grow with our existing clients and their peer organizations is secondly, probably most with partners. So we engage in a number of different types of partnerships. And I think a lot of the the reason for that is so we can learn from partners and learn what's going on in this kind of tech for good space and learn how we can continue to grow and kind of better ourselves and improve our products and our services. So in the partner space, I would say certainly just with salesforce.org as being our channel partner and continuing to grow with them, as we previously talked about. Two would be industry partners. So working with organizations like NetHope, for instance, that's doing a lot of work in the tech for humanitarian space. They do actually work with some international development and kind of climate advocacy organizations too. So NetHope as a pretty strategic partnership for us that allows us to, I would say, continue to kind of hear what that space needs and continue to adopt and grow our product accordingly. Andy is another great one just for social entrepreneurs, AVPN in Asia. So some strategic partnerships that kind of allow us to partner and learn, and our name is then slowly spread in those arenas. The third kind of type of partner I would say is implementation partners. So what's been quite neat over the last few years is as Amp Impact has continued to grow as a product and as the demand for Amp Impact has grown pretty exponentially over the last few years. And we launched Amp Impact on the Salesforce App Exchange back in 2017. As the demand's grown, we've actually then had an opportunity to expand upon the partnerships that we have in the Salesforce.org SI space by helping really, I would say, support organizations like yourselves, Alex, and Dryad, in equipping these organizations to implement Amp Impact. So we really work with all kinds of implementation partners globally. So in regions where we don't have a presence as Vera Solutions, like in the Benelux region or in Australia and APIN, New Zealand, for instance, or with other, in specific kind of different industries that we really value the expertise of other organizations, and certainly with yourself and the work that you're doing, as well as others in the kind of grant making space in the US or in the multilateral space in Europe or in the US. So that's an opportunity, I would think, for our name to be put on display a little bit more, and for organizations to say, hey, this is a really cool product that we can use as a starting place. And then fourthly, I would say in the partnership arena would be just technology partners. So there's a lot of other technology tools that we're oftentimes building systems with. So form tools like Form Titan, or offline data collection tools like TerraWorks, and integration tools like Open Function. So there's a number of different other kind of tech partners that we're engaging with regularly too. And I think certainly that helps expand the opportunities that we have as an organization.
Yeah, there's a lot of threads there I can pull off to decide where to take the conversation next. Let's start maybe working our way backwards. Obviously, my familiarity is as an implementation partner, and I just wanted to give my perspective is that I was really impressed with Amp Impact. I found it was an elegant but sophisticated solution. The whole presentation that you guys had given me was wonderful. I really sensed a feel that this could have a large impact in the nonprofit space. So my next question is, it sounds like you work with larger organizations. I know there's about, you said 375 organizations. I got the impression they're more toward the larger side. Have you noticed any benefit of App Impact to the smaller ones, or is it really more tailored toward the larger ones?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's two ways to, I would say, address this question. One is we're not trying to, I would say, solely serve large organizations, and actually the pricing structure of Amp Impact, I think, is kind of one key way to communicate this is just that it's based on the total portfolio size. So we do have organizations that are, managing 1 million or 1 to 5 million or even 1 to 10 million a year of a portfolio that use the product. So there are, I would say, a wide range of organizations, and those organizations too kind of allow us to be able to work with an organization, for instance, in the Niger Delta. So in the case of the partnerships in the Niger Delta Initiative, or for instance, Horn of Africa Development Initiative in Eastern Africa. So we certainly, I would say, do work with smaller organizations, and by smaller, I would say organizations that are kind of in the 5 million and under of a total portfolio. That being said, I would say different use cases and different impact with the product. So We oftentimes say that with AMP Impact, we're not necessarily trying to be 100% of what a particular group of organizations need, but more so trying to be about 60 to 70% of what everybody needs. So it does allow us then to either kind of take the route of building a smaller system. So in some cases, an organization may actually really just, rather than focused on some of the portfolio functionality, really want to just think about or have a central place to track its frameworks or build out a framework and be able to link those frameworks to indicators and set targets against those indicators and then track the progress against those targets with indicator results and see different performance graphs. So in some cases with smaller organizations, that's feasible and that's a system that allows them to do that. And there is value in that. I think that what we've seen is there are other tools, there are other, I would say, point solutions that kind of are more plug and play impact measurement or monitoring evaluation tools. And those are great too. I think some of those are really helpful for these smaller organizations. And yet some smaller organizations, one, I would say are already using Salesforce. So it's helpful if they can build out some of this functionality on a central system, or two, want to expand into Salesforce. So again, kind of making that long-term decision of how do they invest in the right technologies that are actually going to grow with them in 5-10 years time, rather than just kind of a one-off kind of project-based tool or a one-off kind of annual or 2-year tool that they can use. So certainly do see the value with smaller organizations and do work with them. We're also working with smaller organizations, off of AMP Impact too. So build other monitoring and evaluation systems that are more focused on service delivery, for instance, or building kind of membership portals with smaller nonprofits in Latin America and in Asia and in Africa that primarily I would say that those markets in which there's typically, I would say, a smaller portfolio size or operating budget in some cases, and do have an opportunity, I would say, because we want to keep it pretty wide as well. I think we were started and we haven't been exclusive in the type or size of an organization that we work with, because we want to be able to kind of focus those decisions on the impact that the system is going to have. And in some cases, kind of building a system like, for instance, with World Bicycle Relief, based out of a few different countries in Southern Africa, the system that we got to build for them is having a pretty significant impact in the way that just they operate and the way they sell their bicycles and use their bicycles to kind of bring children to school at higher attendance rates that maybe didn't have an opportunity to attend school as regularly without access to it. So it's more for us a decision kind of or assessing, I would say, the impact that the system might have and the impact that the organization has. And I'd say that's something that's quite cool about the work that we do and the job that I have specifically in the business development space is getting to kind of see where we think we can best solve problems, and whether it's our product like AMP Impact that's going to support the effort there, or if it's going to be more of a kind of custom design solution that's configured on the Salesforce platform and maybe leveraging other tools that the organization may already use.
Can you talk a little bit about the steps that you take? Because I understand it's more of a white glove approach. You actually work with the client or the potential client. You figure out their needs and you go through this exercise or workshops together to be able to help them leverage the benefit of AMP Impact.
Yeah, great question. So we generally, with any kind of, and similar, I would say, to how a lot of consultancies operate in terms of just a technology build, is we'll run through a series of different project stages in order to actually see success of the project. And those range in timeframes as well, based on the complexity and commitment from our side and commitment from the client side as well in terms of engagement. It is going to be an investment from, I would say, a time standpoint and a financial standpoint. And that's really because we're trying to kind of build something that's going to continue to grow with the organization and again be around in 5 or 10 years time to continue to support the organization. So our projects typically start with some form of discovery workshops or discovery to really kind of dig a bit deeper into requirements, into internal systems, internal processes. Sometimes that means actually mapping business processes and helping kind of organizations define those processes and process flows for maybe one of the first times, or establish those or align those. A lot of alignment in cases too, where it's larger enterprise organizations and we're actually kind of aligning different program teams or different groups of individuals, whether it's, the MEL team and the grants team for a grant maker, whether it's the finance team and the program team for an implementer. We're helping kind of bring together what needs to happen in the system in order for all user groups to be able to benefit and really see the value that they're hoping to see. So starting with those discovery workshops, moving into a system or solution design. So this is the fun part where we get to kind of lean on some cases AMP Impact is the product, a lot of cases the native functionality of Salesforce, and in a lot of cases too, just how can we extend the system into the existing systems that organizations may already use. So whether it's an ERP system or a accounting system or a form tool or an offline data collection tool, how do we kind of bring that into the solution design? We then move into configuration. So as an organization, we're configuring on the Salesforce platform, typically doing, our own testing, and in some cases operating in more of a sprint model where we're kind of showcasing various pieces at different times. We may even have, built in the discovery workshops, a prototype. So there's already kind of something there for organizations to begin to get their hands on, as well as begin to just explore themselves and provide feedback to. After configuring, we'll move into a user acceptance testing period, or UAT, where we're just gathering feedback and ensuring that we're aligned towards the right acceptance criteria as a product. Then moving into deployment. So deploying, and in that case, kind of really taking the system and as we typically build in a sandbox environment or kind of like a playground environment, if for maybe a friendlier term there, and deploying that to production. So it's a live instance that then can be used and data can be imported or migrated over from an existing platform or an existing Excel sheets. We then conduct training. Kind of a key piece of this is really how do we ensure that all users are just comfortable using the system. And I think we could probably have a whole nother hour-long podcast on change management here, but training is a big part of that, and ensuring that there's a comfort level and an excitement within the rollout of using the system and starting to input the data and just kind of have it actually be like a main part of these organizations daily. So we oftentimes encourage organizations to even name their system when they're rolling out and starting training. So there's just some excitement around a name that kind of exemplifies their mission or their vision. And it serves as kind of a part of their team, the system does, which is always fun to see when we get to be a part of some of those brainstorms and see what comes to fruition from those. So after training, support, I would say, is kind of it ranges from kind of heavier support for some organizations to no support. Oftentimes we are supporting an internal system administrator from the client side, or even their product owner longer term, to just continue to enhance the platform and ensure user adoption across the organization, and just really be sure that the individuals that are using the platform are getting the value out of it that they need, and getting the answers to the questions that they may have around their data that are going to help them redirect their programs or just enhance their programming efforts. Support, and then I would say continued enhancements as needed. Some cases like the Ellen John AIDS Foundation, a great example. We actually originally built their system back in 2011, one of our first Salesforce-based grants management systems that helped to really shape the roadmap and the product, I would say, of AMP Impact in terms of what we built. And we just transitioned them over from that custom system to AMP Impact back in 2020. And now they get to continue to grow with the product as the product sees 3 releases a year. So we as an organization, I would say, get to work in a number of different capacities, but more or less, I would say it typically follows that flow of project phases and then leads to, I would say, some kind of ongoing relationship or ongoing support as necessary.
It's wonderful to see that you have really, like I said, a white glove approach. It's really hand-holding, making sure that the project is a success, making sure that the nonprofit really benefits from everything that AMP Impact offers. And there are so many threads that you mentioned that I really could pull on, so I have to figure out where to go next. You mentioned change management. That is definitely one of the reoccurring topics on this podcast. It's probably one of the strongest, or at least the heaviest task to overcome. So I'm happy you touched upon it yourself. You also mentioned working with partners. I wanted to roll back for a second. I had a podcast last week talking about how certain vendors are becoming so large and producing such advanced technologies and platforms and apps that they actually have their own certification programs. And I believe AMP Impact, or Vera Solutions, is one of those organizations. Is that right?
Yeah, great question. We're in our infancy stages of it, but yes, it is right. We're, I would say, not not to the extent of where Salesforce is with their certifications, but we did build a AMP Impact certification exam. Really, I would say the goal being to help other organizations understand the product so they can better serve the organizations that they're serving in the social sector. We just actually extended upon the original exam that we had into more of an admin exam for AMP Impact, and something that we'll be launching in the coming months. So we're starting to build that out, starting to leverage Salesforce trailheads as well, so others can learn about AMP Impact. And I would say beyond AMP Impact, learn about kind of the functional needs of nonprofits and grant makers and multilateral orgs just in this kind of impact measurement and portfolio management space specifically. So something we're focused on as an organization, and we have a lot of, I would say, growing and evolving and exciting training, learning, and development initiatives internally, and are really trying to think about like how do we kind of leverage those externally too with our partners. It's a key part as we see so many nonprofits actually kind of even building their own internal Salesforce teams, which is really encouraging, or teams of Salesforce developers that they know kind of they're investing in the platform longer term and know they want to build up their internal skill set. So it's encouraging to kind of to see that happening, and something that we're kind of trying to think through is how do we continue to support those organizations in the best way, and whether that's through advanced certification programs or trailheads or different training mechanisms or strategies. It's ideally helping to, I would say, continue to grow just technology in the space and ensure that teams, social organizations are really well equipped to manage the systems that they're building.
So you touched upon all the different steps in the project delivery. Obviously, you have a internal team that supports it. So in addition to just helping out with AMP Impact, you offer other services. So sometimes, I imagine most of the time, part of the solution delivery is the implementation of AMP Impact. But there may be situations where it doesn't, or maybe you could tell me if it does or doesn't. But you also implement other packages along the way. So it's not just a matter of saying, here, Mr. or Mrs. Client, this is the only thing you need. Here's AMP Impact. We set it up for you all through the steps that you mentioned. There are some situations where they might say, well, we also want some kind of mass marketing tool or integration tool or something like that. So this is something I understand that you can help with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have our niche. So in the Salesforce ecosystem, I think we're really wanting to focus in the program management, impact measurement, grant management space, strategic planning space, corporate planning space. And there's other organizations out there, like I know Dryad does a lot of great work in the fundraising space, for instance, where Vera has done a little, but certainly doesn't have the same experience as a lot of other partners. So we are trying to kind of stay focused in our niche. And that's where I think we add the most value, both as a team of Verites, who a lot of us come from the international development space or on the program delivery space. And so we can kind of add that perspective to any projects. That being said, yeah, we do work with organizations where we're not building AMP Impact and in specific regions, I would say more so than others. But we're in the process, I would say, of kicking off a project with a kind of organization in the kind of environmental farming space that will help different members with the membership management. So help different members interact with a system and kind of learn from a central knowledge base that'll be based on Salesforce Experience Cloud. And another great example is kind of a smaller nonprofit that's operating in the Amazon in Brazil and helping them actually more on the service delivery side. So we do projects outside of AMP Impact. A lot of AMP Impact projects will include integrations, and that's a space that we want to also certainly build our muscle and continue to exercise that muscle, but also that's so relevant if our goal as an organization is to help bring transparency and accountability. It's helping organizations kind of continue to operate with the systems that they're using, but then bring together the right data in one source of truth. So there is that source of truth for individuals internally, and that means integrations are necessary in a lot of cases. So yeah, continue to grow. I think we're open to exploring other arenas too as a consultancy, but also know that this space of program management and impact measurement and portfolio management and grant makers and strategic planning is one that really excites us and allows us to kind of focus on the actual kind of delivering of the work side of it, which I think really sparks and ignites and encourages the individuals that work within Vera.
Love it. Love it. So many questions, so little time. I do want to respect our timetable. There was one thing I noticed that I'd love to ask you is I saw something about the 2022 Real Leaders Impact Award. Could you talk a bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an opportunity for kind of purpose-driven organizations to kind of, well, it's a ranking, I would say, of top impact companies. And Real Leaders as an organization recognizes, I would say, over the last 5 years or so, the rise in purpose-driven businesses. And in that, they're kind of continuing to expand this list that they collate on an annual basis. And I think they've been doing it for the last 4 years or so. Kind of have to check my stats there. So it's a diverse group of companies from around the world that really just prove that businesses can thrive and help build a better world. And I think for us, it's something that's so ingrained in our culture and who we are and the type of work we do. So from kind of a business standpoint, it's neat, I would say, to learn a lot of the other organizations on the list are also, for instance, certified B corporations. And so we have opportunities to learn alongside other Real Leader selected organizations, or in this case, the other 199 that are part of the 200 within the list this year. And they range from very large organizations and kind of corporations that are helping kind of shift some of their business practices to actually focusing on the kind of social impact that they're having, like Patagonia being an example that I know everyone references and knows from their branding and their mission as an organization, to smaller organizations that are, seeing problems and helping fill those. So yeah, something I think we're certainly honored to be a part of. I know there's Tesla and Johnson and CVS Health and some of these big organizations that really are kind of continuing to evolve, how they operate and how they do business. And we can be inspired by that too, as even I would say, smaller organization in a breadth of what that list entails.
You mentioned that Vera Solutions wants to continue to evolve. So, what would the future, or what does the future of Vera Solutions look like?
Hmm. Big question. I mean, I think first and foremost, we want to continue to identify great opportunities that we can serve and help amplify their impact. And that probably sounds cheesy and generic, but that's how we've grown over the last 12 years. And that's how we've grown our product as well. So as Amp Impact continues to evolve into more complex kind of financial management, indicator management, it's because we've heard that's a need with organizations and we want to continue to serve them. So as an organization, I think we'll continue to, one, not only work with these organizations, but help to bring them together. Something that we've been really encouraged by is as we continue to grow the AMP Impact community of practice. So the partners like yourselves and the clients that we have, as well as just other partners in the space, it's an opportunity to really convene a group of organizations that may not have opportunities to convene and learn from each other. So as Vera Solutions, I think we're hoping to really kind of drive that and encourage and foster that in bigger ways in the coming years. We're certainly open to continuing to grow in the product space with AMP Impact, of course. And gosh, there's a roadmap out there that continues to just grow. And we're certainly looking kind of 1, 2, 3 years out of functionality that's sitting on that we get to kind of digest and design based on how and what our clients need. But then also into other products, if the opportunity arises. I think the innovation is in our bones here at Vera. And as we uncover other problems within the sector, we're really keen to help try to solve them. So I'm hoping that's where we get to go, and hoping along the way, it means that our team also grows. So we're about 100 right now, and get to continue to welcome new colleagues from, Mumbai and India and Cape Town and South Africa and Washington, D.C. in the U.S. So get to engage, I would say, and learn from each other internally, which is always really encouraging. And I hope that we get to welcome many more in the coming years.
That's lovely to hear. And for the record, I don't think it's cheesy at all because you guys have a proven success metric. You have a history of success. So I really wish the best for you and for Vera Solutions. So listen, this has been great. Where can people find more about you? And if they want to get in touch with Vera Solutions, where can they go?
Yeah, you can head on over to verasolutions.org or ampimpact.org as our product. Either way, there's a contact form on there. I'm also happy to share my direct email address just to say hello to anyone who is curious or has questions or wants to chat through any problems that that you might have as a nonprofit, or any ideas too, just within the space. I think I love connecting with individuals like yourself, Alex, that are really on this mission to help amplify the impact of the social sector. So thanks so much for having me, and yeah, excited to kind of tune into the other podcasts and hear what else we have on tap and learn from others.
Katrina, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Alex.
All right, folks, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again next time for Agents of Nonprofit.